This happened 21 years ago when I was in college, yet I feel like it happened yesterday since I can't shake the frightening memory of what went down that evening. I lived at home during these years, and sometimes I would visit a few old friends from high school who still lived in my hometown. It was a brisk October night, well past midnight, and I had just set out on foot to home from my friend's house. For a little background, this is an older style town. A bit on the smaller side, but I still had a decent walk ahead of me. About a mile if I had to guess. These sidewalks are drenched in darkness with enough light from yellow street lamps to help pedestrians see ahead. I'd walked about a block before I noticed someone suddenly walking right behind me. That usually wouldn't be a problem as someone else walking home meant you weren't alone, but I immediately sensed something off about this guy, as he'd seemingly come out of nowhere. And again, it was well past midnight. He didn't seem to be a guy just walking home. I couldn't even turn around to see his appearance, as it might have set him off. I could only see what he looked like out of the corner of my eye. He was huge, about 6'4", and appeared to be in his mid-20s. I noticed his intense expression on his face from the corner of my eye. This guy was royally pissed off about something, and it looked like he was about to take it out on me. I have to admit, it wasn't so bad when he was only walking behind me, but he was also walking fast, which wasn't a big deal, right? I assumed he would pass me up, and then that would be that. But when he got within 1 foot of me, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I continued walking as if nothing was wrong. I mean, the guy was just walking behind me, so it's not like I had a legitimate reason to hit the panic button and start freaking out just yet. Then, the man started panting heavily. Not like someone would when they were out of breath, but rather he was breathing heavily through his nose, making the strange vibes worse. At some point, I inevitably crossed an adjacent street, hoping that he would go a different way, and that this nightmare would be over. But after I made it to the other side with him still close behind me, I realized this was far from over. While on that same road, I crossed in the middle of the block to the other side. I figured if I did this, I would be on my side and he would stay put, but that's not what happened. Instead, he followed behind me, seemingly picking up his pace even more. My heart had already been racing, but now it was beating out of my chest. I mean, who follows someone across the street in the dead middle of the block? I was so terrified at this point that I felt, at any moment, I might scream and take off running down the street. After he followed me to the other side, I was sure that this guy would grab me and that I would never see my family again. But I kept my composure and continued moving forward. As I did, the words of Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries ran through my mind, saying, "A young man left his friend's house late one night after a few of his buddies were watching movies together. He was never seen again." My reaction may have been extreme, but I honestly felt that this guy would do something to hurt me. Well, at this point, I came to another street to cross. I ended up crossing it while the car was racing by. I wouldn't say that it almost hit me, but the driver gave me an awkward look and a long horn honk to express his displeasure at my bolting out in front of him like I did as he passed. I had no choice but to ignore it and let it roll off my back. Running out in front of a car may have been stupid, but it was a blessing in disguise. Because after I caused a scene, the strange man went up the road adjacent to the one I was on, meaning he was no longer behind me. Relief washed over me as I watched him walk away. I got home just fine that night, though the memory reminds me, along with everyone listening to this, that walking alone at night may not be such a good idea, even if you're a stronger young guy like I was. As for the stalker, I'm not sure what his motivation was for following so close to me like that, but it was incredibly frightening at the time, especially when he crossed the street with me mid-block for no good reason. In hindsight, I could only speculate, but now that I'm older and wiser, I realize the guy might have been on drugs, possibly crack, but again, that's only speculation. It's also possible that he had just come from one of our town's dive bars and was drunk. Maybe he'd been kicked out or something, I don't know. Thankfully, I never saw him again after that, nor did I walk alone for almost a mile away like that again so late at night. I live in a very small town where everyone knows everyone else. Last weekend, a girl walked up to my porch and said that she had a friend who wanted to get to know me and asked if I was single. I told her I was, and she asked for my number. I didn't see the harm in that, as I am open to meeting new people. Well, big dumb mistake on my part. I'll never do that again. She left, and about 5 minutes later I received a text from the guy. And it turns out, I have known of this person for almost 30 years, but we've never met or spoken to each other. He told me that he thought I was pretty and that he'd like to get to know me better and asked if he could stop by to talk in person. I said that was fine. The guy shows up with 4 other people, and it was immediately clear to me that they were all on drugs of some sort. I hadn't seen him for a very long time, so I was not expecting how he looked. His name is Carrie, and he didn't have a single tooth left in his mouth. He might have weighed 110 pounds, 5'7" at most. I was immediately regretful. Not only were all of his teeth missing, but he had no job, no car, no money, and was currently homeless. I recognized immediately that this guy was trying to find a home for the winter, and he thinks he's gonna date me. It's obvious he thinks very highly of his looks and his charming ways. Honestly, his flirting was extremely repulsive. I got rid of him by making up an excuse that I had to be somewhere. 4 days later, my doorbell cam captured a video of Carrie walking up to my porch steps, where he decided to sit with his back to the camera. He turned and looked directly at the camera twice. It gets creepier a few days later. I woke up on Friday morning at about 5:30 a.m. and decided to smoke a cigarette. I don't smoke inside, and since I caught him sitting on my porch step, I would check my camera for any sight of him, and I didn't see anyone, so I stepped out and smoked. I was half asleep and staring down at the ground when I heard a voice. My head snapped up, and I'll be damned, he was standing less than 3 feet from me. I nearly jumped out of my skin and screamed at him and said, "You just scared the crap out of me. What the actual hell is wrong with you?" I truly have no idea what direction he came from, and how he was able to walk up on my porch without making a single sound. He laughed until he saw that I was furious. Then he started explaining that he was there to tell me his phone had died, and wanted to know if I had tried calling or texting him. The only text I sent to him was asking why the hell he was sitting on my front porch at 3:47 a.m., and he never answered. Leaning in toward me, trying to flirt with me after creeping me the hell out, he says, "Good morning, sunshine." Oh, I wanted to slap his ugly face. I told him, "I'm not a morning person at all, so you need to go." He started explaining again why he was there, and then he started pouting and walked away very slowly, and kept turning back to look at me like I was going to change my mind and invite him in or something. It was unbelievable. My doorbell camera actually recorded part of this interaction. After that, he started watching me from half a block away in front of a bowling alley that has a bench that directly lines up with my front door. For 2 days, he watched my every move. It even started pouring rain, and he just sat there watching me. I haven't seen him around in a couple of days, but I'm hoping he moved on to someone else. But my intuition is saying that he isn't done just yet. The cops know all about it. My son works for our sheriff's department and filled them in on it. This is one of the creepiest encounters I have ever had, and I'm a paranormal investigator. I've always said that it's the living you gotta worry about, and this proves it. Hey Raven, I told you I would eventually write this story out, so here it is. I would prefer if you would make this anonymous, not for me, but for the other people involved. It's really easy to find the records of this if you know where to look. I need to give a warning as this story does involve mentions of an abuser. I will not go into details. I have to give some backstory for how I could be around this person and not know who he really was. A long time ago, I worked at a video rental store. I would trade rentals for free sandwiches from the Subway next door. This led to hanging out at a Denny's after work early in the morning. Through this, I met many different people. The Denny's was off I-5 between Seattle and Portland, so many different types of people gravitated there. One night, I strolled in after work, and the place was rather dead. There was a new person sitting in the smoking section. Yes, it was that long ago. Me being me, I sat down across from them in the booth, uninvited. The person was wearing a black trench coat, had long blonde hair, and all the looks of an edgelord. Just the kind of person that would give at least a good conversation. I sat down and said, "Hey, I'm Bill. You look like you need a friend." "Nope, don't need friends," he said. Undaunted. "Well, I always need more friends." This was the sort of friendship that would last for 20 years, until it all went to hell. For the first few years, we were just roommates, in a house of 11 people. I will call this person Dave. Sorry for all the Daves out there. Dave was 6'6" and thin. He had mental problems, as in on disability. I was told that it was because of a sleeping issue that he had, which I witnessed. He might sleep one night out of 5. The rest of the time, if you walked by him sleeping, his eyes would pop open and see who it was. Given his sleeping issues, he slept on the couch in the computer room of the house. Dave was also a compulsive liar. Never a lie that would hurt anyone or get someone's hopes up. Just about what he had done in his life and things that he knew. It really came across as brilliant storytelling. It's hard to explain how much it was to listen to his stories. As a bonus, he was an excellent game master for D&D. Over the years, some of what I thought were lies would actually turn out to be true. So it made it even harder to pass off what he would say. He was also one of the most well-read people I knew. We could argue philosophy, dissect books we read, and even once had a screaming match over the theories of Stephen Hawking. I eventually moved out of the house. I got married and bought a house, so there ended up being some distance. He moved away to Oregon, then Las Vegas. Then he moved in with me and my family for a short time. Looking back, I didn't know the risk I took. Then, he started a relationship with a longtime friend of his who lived a long ways away. In short order, he moved in with her. This is where it gets dark. So, Dave and Mary's daughter all moved in together. They had 2 of their own kids together. Mary's daughter went off to college and then went to visit her dad. This is when it all came out. Dave had actually been inappropriate with her for 4 years. She hadn't had the courage to press charges until she was states away at her dad's. Dave called me and admitted all of it, and asked for my forgiveness. I cannot explain how shocked and enraged I was. I had been telegaming with him, his wife, and his stepdaughter for years. I had let this man into my home with my own 2 daughters. I'm lucky that I was 2/3 of the US away from him. I don't know what I would have done, and I don't want to find out. Another bit of luck was that this was in a state that could have given him the death penalty. He got life without parole. I cannot imagine what it was like for Mary and her daughter, let alone the 2 that he had with Mary. I was investigated along with him, as I had been his friend for 20 years. How could I not have seen it? Well, it was only in hindsight. All of his girlfriends had teenage daughters, or they looked young for their age. I assisted in the investigation by giving him names and numbers of all the people that I was still in contact with. This was with full knowledge that questions would be asked about me, that my background would be looked into. I knew that I was clean, and I had passed some pretty rigorous checks in my past. Even held a security clearance once, which I could never hold again thanks to this. Let me tell you, the police investigator was one of the nicest guys in the world. He had already done some checks into me and told me that I was not considered part of Dave's group. This was all done before I even knew. You don't know you're being investigated until they want to tell you. It had to be one of the most surreal moments in my life. I even volunteered for him to remote desktop into my computer for the investigation into me. Keep in mind that I hadn't been face-to-face with Dave for almost a decade at this point. Everything had been online or over the phone. I think I'm rambling, but I don't know who needs to hear this. Don't blame yourself for not knowing the filth in others' hearts around you. The only way you could see it is if you are like them. Because you aren't looking for it. You would have to be something like them to see it. At least, that's what I tell myself. Thank you for taking the time, Raven. And to all those out there, don't blame yourself for others' actions. They are not you. So this happened back in the summer of 2020. I was working at a highly esteemed golf club and hotel, and by this point I had worked there for a number of months, and was, and still am, good friends with a lot of the staff. That June I had turned 18 and now was able to work on the bar, and I really enjoyed meeting new people and having fun with my coworkers. Everything was great. We had new starters coming and going, and I was always friendly with all of them, as I am a firm believer that there needs to be more kindness in the world. I digress. We had a girl start with us on the service side of things. We will call her Ellie. Ellie started off being really nice, and just your average normal girl. But her personal hygiene wasn't the best. Not that she didn't take care of herself physically, but you could smell her before you could see her. As I did with everyone else, both on my team on the bar and the floor staff, I was as nice as possible to her, and she was a bit too nice to me. To the point where my colleagues were saying that we would make a cute couple. At the time, I was already in a relationship, so I just genuinely wasn't interested. This stayed the same for a couple of days, until on my smoke break, probably around 1 a.m., Ellie comes out and joins me. We just sit and chat and the like until she says something that catches me off guard. She had told me that she was 15, when she had told the managers and the rest of the staff that she was 18. I didn't really think anything of it, other than, why would you lie about that? Until the next day when I was supposed to train her on the bar. I explained to the manager in private what she told me the night before, and he said that he would check it before he moves Ellie to my station, to which I thought fair enough, and then got on with my work. About an hour later, when we had a really slow part of our shift, she asked me if she could talk to me out in the smoking area. I agreed, trying to be nice, and switched with my coworker. As soon as we got outside, Ellie just starts breaking down, tears streaming from her eyes, saying so much but not really making any sense. Me being me, I kind of brought her in for a hug as I don't really know what to do in these situations. She sobs into my shoulder for a good 5 to 10 minutes before she calms down. We sit and talk about something else before heading back inside to continue our duties. I didn't know at this point, but Ellie was telling everyone on the service floor that I had asked her out, and saying that we were now in a relationship. Still, not knowing what she had told half of my coworkers, she came over and asked for my Snapchat, which I obliged again, just trying to be nice. Nothing else really happened that night. It's only when I was getting on my motorbike that she came up and asked if I could give her a lift home. I live in the complete opposite direction as to where Ellie did, and I didn't have a spare helmet, so I said no. And she basically started crying again, saying that she had no way else home. I offered to buy her a taxi, but she declined, now completely normal, and no signs of worry about how she would get home and the like. So I set off. And as I'm riding home, my music keeps getting paused by the notification sound every 3 seconds. I don't really think much of it, as I'm in a few groups and presumed there was a discussion, or argument, going on in one of them. It was only when I got home that I noticed I had 42 messages from Ellie asking if I got home yet and if I was okay. And then one caught my attention. I love you. I had known this girl that I still didn't know the age of for less than 2 weeks, and she was saying that she loved me? I messaged my girlfriend at the time and explained the situation. I also replied to Ellie saying that I had just gotten home and to please refrain from saying things like that, as I had a girlfriend and that was that. Or so I thought. The next day, Ellie was off, which was somewhat of a relief as I didn't really want to be around her, as she was starting to creep me out. Then, one of my close friends, Matt, came up to me and said that she had told everyone that I had asked her out, that we were now dating, and that I took her home on my bike. Which I adamantly denied as, well, none of that had happened. I messaged Ellie asking, "What the hell?" as this was completely random and infuriated me slightly. She opened the message, and the little bubble icon that Snapchat has went on and off a few times before her character disappeared. But then a picture came through. I opened it, and she had taken a selfie outside of my flat door. Now completely livid, I asked her how the hell she found where I lived, and what she was doing there. I said that if she didn't leave now, I was going to call the police. She said she wanted to see if I was at home so that we could, quote, spend the day together. To say that I was angry was an understatement, but I was also very, very creeped out. I tried to get back to work and just finished my shift, as I had booked off for the next couple of days, and I needed it. The shift was very uneventful, as you would expect at a golf club. After finishing, I kind of just got on my bike and headed home, not wanting to look at my phone. Which I didn't for that night. And the next day, when I eventually looked at my phone, I had over 100 texts and missed calls. All from Ellie. This was my breaking point. I called my manager and HR and explained the situation, and basically said it was me or her who had to leave. As I'm still on the phone, I get a knock on my door. I don't have a peephole, so I had to open it to see who it was. Without thinking, I excused myself from the phone call and opened the door. It was Ellie, and she stood there in what I could only describe as lingerie. I stood shocked and slightly disgusted. I looked her up and down and sort of said, "What the hell?" under my breath, before near enough slamming the door in her face and locking it. I ran back to my phone and near enough shouted at my manager and HR that I was filing a restraining order on Ellie because she had just shown up at my door when she should have been at work, and said that if they didn't fire her as of right now, I would be finding somewhere else to work, as this had gotten out of hand. They said that she had gone too far and they would terminate her contract after the phone call. After finishing up with both my manager and the HR team, I called the police, as I could hear her asking me to open the door during this time. The police came, and she actually attacked one of the female officers, saying, "He's mine." Well, safe to say, she got arrested. They took her away. I spoke to one of the officers about a restraining order and found out that she is no stranger to them. She'd been arrested 5 times for similar offenses, and I also found out that she was 15. I still feel gross knowing how old she was and seeing her in such revealing clothes. I later had to go to court to settle the restraining order for some reason that I can't remember, and Ellie was just giving my girlfriend, who I brought for moral support, the most evil eyes I had ever seen. She got arrested for forging an ID, public indecency, and assaulting a police officer on top of the restraining order. Deep down, I know she was struggling, and part of me feels bad, but what she did was wrong, and honestly scared me a bit. I don't know how she found out my exact address because I don't allow Snapchat access to my location. Thank you all for letting me share this, and I hope you all had a good holiday. So, I used to hike to the Hollywood sign. One of my favorite hobbies, although I always needed a couple of days of recovery afterwards. Sadly, these hikes have come to an unfortunate end, and the following is why. A year ago, I did the usual wake up at 5:30 a.m., breakfast, exercise clothes, stretches, and then left. I always take the B line, formerly the Red Line, from downtown Los Angeles to East Hollywood, and then begin my hike. To and back takes around 3 hours. The first hour from the station to Griffith Park, which leads to the sign, was fine. I was walking along, taking in nature, the cool air, and the feeling of being with the natural atmosphere outside of the city. Then, I entered the park. As I entered where the parking lot was, a black car with its windows tinted pulled up. Since I was a kid, I've learned to trust my sixth sense, i.e., that instinct that has no physical evidence but tells me something is either right or seriously wrong. Sadly, in this case, my instincts told me that something was wrong, and I was right. 2 guys with black hoodies came out of the car. Trusting aforementioned sixth sense, I stopped and watched. Both men stopped and turned to stare at me. Thankfully, this was early in the morning, so there was daylight. I realized, however, had they decided to try to attack me, I'd have little recourse to defend myself. So I decided to do some acting. I looked around, looking like intentionally I was exploring the area or trying to figure out where I was. Thankfully, they appeared to buy it. They walked up the trail out of sight. I cautiously continued my hike, being cautious to keep them ahead of me. There is a gang which shall remain unmentioned who has, on occasion, murdered people in this area. So, this is a reason, in my opinion, to do hikes early in the morning, and with people if you can. You never know who may be on the trail with you. I remember once, when I was 5, I might have interacted with the Stalker. It was Halloween night, and me and my friends were trick-or-treating. A young lady about 21 came up to me and asked me and my friends to follow her. We took a moment and devised a plan. Now, we were kids and this plan was really dumb. They decided that they would go get their parents and then come back, but I could go ahead. So, I followed her. Now, you're probably yelling stranger danger in your head, but it was Halloween, so that didn't come into effect. We were about halfway to her house when my neighbor called my name. He asked me what I was doing with her. I said that she asked me to follow her, so I did. After that, the neighbor went into parent mode. He told her to let go of me, and she ran. I was still holding on to her, so I let go and my neighbor helped me up. Then, he said to never follow a stranger. I promised and walked back to my friends. They asked if I was okay, and I said yes, but that it was scary. Now, I wonder if my neighbor hadn't been there, where would I be now? This person did also submit a follow-up. Hey, it's me again, Raven. I wanted to clarify some things from my last post. Yes, my parents are aware of this event. Also, my friend and I were in a shady neighborhood. Anyway, here's the follow-up. After that night, my mom and dad called the police. That same year, a SWAT team had actually raided her house. I know this because I was playing in my front yard at the time. Apparently, inside, they found some pictures of me everywhere. She was in her basement, and she was, to my photos. I was 5, so I really just didn't understand, or see what was wrong. But to my neighbor, if you're out there, thank you. I wouldn't be. So that, my friends, was a collection of some stalker and stranger stories. Basically stories of the let's not meet variety where the people next to you are the true horror of the tale. As always, these stories do come with a bit of edutainment, if you will. Educational in that I hope anyone who finds themselves in situations similar can try to get out of them because they've heard these stories, which are entertaining. It makes sense from that. If you enjoyed these stories, please do hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Please leave me a comment with your thoughts or how you're doing today or how things are going for you. I'd love to hear from you. You can also submit your stories to astheravendreams.com, listen to the podcast and other platforms such as Spotify, Pandora, Audible, or join Patreon memberships to get early access to content like this. All that said, my friends, I hope I see you again here very soon, but until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Please do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, much love, and sleep well.